about you today. We're going to talk about what it was like before you were born. Is that okay? I guess it's not okay. Is it okay? Do I have your permission to talk about your labor and delivery? Yeah? Well, thank you, Senor. Welcome back to our channel. In today's video we are going to be talking about what it was like giving birth the third time around, and by we I'm talking about me and this little guy. I'm honestly happy that he's awake because I have a loud mouth, so I probably accidentally wake him up anyway, so it works out, right my boy? I'm gonna get him comfortable and then I'll be right back. So if you watched our last video, you would know that we got induced on the 28th. We were supposed to be induced on the 27th, but the hospital didn't have space for us, so on the 28th we went in to get induced at 5 a.m. Before I went in, I was told to have a late breakfast, so before we went, we stopped at McDonald's and I got a fruit and maple oatmeal. They're out of the apples to go inside the fruit and maple oatmeal, so I was kind of salty. And the guy forgot to cut my sweet tea, so it was just like sweet. I can't drink straight sweet tea because it's just way too sweet. Why can't I say sweet today? I couldn't drink it, but it was fine. The boys' food was fine. Eli's food was fine. So it was fine. We got to the hospital. We were a little bit late. We were like there at 5:10 or so. But everything was fine. We checked in. We got into the room. I got into the gown. That gown is so hard to get into, so I'm always really happy when Eli's there so he can like zip up, like tie up the back for me and button it properly, because I just feel like I'm swimming in it and like I don't know what buttons correlate to what. It's always better for Eli to like help me at the back, or else I would be like walking around with literally my butt hanging out. But anyways, we're moving on. Okay, so like I said, we got there at like 5:10. By 6:20, I had blood drawn, I had an IV hooked up to me, and I had my cervix checked. I was still 1.5 centimeters dilated, which meant at that point I had been 1.5 centimeters dilated for a solid month. There were a whole bunch of women on this pregnancy form that I was looking at like, oh, a 1 centimeter dilated could mean that you're going to go into labor in the next 2 hours, and it could mean that you're going to go into labor in the next month. Yeah, I'm one of those people that it means like nothing, even on the third baby. So anyways, hey, he's kind of sleep cooing right now. He's like sleepy. Okay, so around that time, at like around 6:20, 6:25, the baby's heart rate was 113 and my blood pressure was 115/73. Yeah, so everything was looking good. We were doing good. At 6:50, I got the Pitocin to get my contractions going and everything like that, to try to transition my body into labor at 6:50. Nothing really happened for a while. I was feeling little contractions, nothing major or anything, just like tiny contractions. So while I was having those tiny contractions, I decided to take a nap, and so I did take a nap, and that was good. At around 10:39 was when I started having like major contractions, like painful contractions. It was painful, but it wasn't like unbearable painful. So at that point I talked to the nurse and I was like, hey, I don't remember when I'm supposed to get the epidural. Will you let me know when I'm supposed to get the epidural? And she was like, well, basically around the time when you can't stand the contraction pain anymore. That's kind of dangerous to tell me. By 10:43, my blood pressure was 115/77. My contractions were about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes apart. She finally kind of like slowed them down because they had been like that for a while and I was getting pretty tired. So I took another nap after that, after the contractions were slowed down. Like I said, they weren't unbearable, so I was still able to like sleep a little bit. I woke up at around 12:08 and I was hungry. My vegetable broth that I had ordered came in. I was on a strictly clear liquid diet from the time that I walked into the hospital until I gave birth to the baby. I only had like a few options, being that we're vegetarian. There was the vegetable broth, popsicles and sodas and apple juice, cranberry juice, water, just some stuff like that. The vegetable broth ended up being really salty, and even though I ordered 2 of them, I only drank 1 because I was like really concerned about that amount of salt, and also it was just really hard to drink. I was hoping that there was something substantial in the vegetable broth that would give me some energy to like push and all that stuff. Yeah, but I was getting really tired at this point. The contractions were getting a lot worse and I was just in a lot of pain. So at that point Eli was like, you know, you need to get that epidural like now. So we called for the nurse to call for the anesthesiologist. At 2:35, I got the epidural, started getting the epidural, and it took until 3:09 for us to finish. That was 34 minutes of craziness. I never calculated how long an epidural took before, but this felt like the longest one. It was definitely the most painful one I've ever had. The anesthesiologist is going into my back. I'm in the position, my chin's tucked, my back's out. I'm holding Eli instead of a nurse. The first 2 times I got an epidural, I was holding the nurse. Eli was in the room, but he was just like looking at me. So they start going in. They did this thing that feels like a bee sting. It's supposed to numb it so you don't feel it as much, and you just are supposed to feel like a lot of pressure in the back. I was feeling this really super sharp pain in my right leg, and it went numb. So I was like, something's wrong, it doesn't feel right, like something's really wrong. At this point, she was like, okay. And I believe she pulled the needle out, but I couldn't tell 100%. And then Eli said he wasn't feeling good. And everyone looked at him. Everyone was looking at me before. We all looked at him, and he looked white. Like, I mean, he's white, but like, he would give Edward from Twilight like a run for his money at this point. Like, he was pale, like pale. They had him sit down, and they called for another nurse who brought him some apple juice in a wheelchair. He was fine. He just sat down for the rest of the procedure. I was holding the nurse after that. The second time she went in, I was feeling that same sharp pain on my left leg now. So I guess she kind of over-adjusted and went too far to the left. I really don't know how it works, but it was terrible, like really bad pain. I said, okay, it's wrong, something's wrong again, like it feels really bad, and she was asking me what area and stuff like that. She was like, this is good, this is what you need to do, you need to tell us if it's painful so we can put it in like where it's supposed to go. After that, I didn't feel anything except for pressure. It felt normal. She was done with the procedure and did something, and she was like, if you feel any tingling in your feet, taste something in your tongue, I don't know. There were certain things that if I did experience, it would be bad, and I didn't experience any of those, so everything was fine. So apparently my contractions were supposed to feel fine after 15 minutes. That's how long it would take the epidural to kick in. That was another thing that made it like a little bit complicated. My contractions were still around 2 minutes apart, 1.5 to 2 minutes apart. They had to slow the Pitocin down before giving me the epidural, before the anesthesiologist actually came in. While I was getting the epidural done, we had to stop when she had the needle out, when I was saying it was a little painful, to wait for contractions to pass, because it was kind of hard to sit still during those contractions. After I got the epidural, I was still feeling a lot of pain. The contractions were getting kind of really bad. I wasn't doing very well, and the nurse was saying, you know, you shouldn't be feeling this much pain, so something is wrong. And she was just like, yeah, we're either gonna have to go back in and reposition it, or there's not enough medicine in the like line. Eli and I were looking at each other like, please don't go back in. I was kind of just like, I would rather them not go back in and I just sit through this pain than have them go back in and something ends up wrong with like my legs or my back or something like that, because it really felt like it was damaging. They called the anesthesiologist after like 20 minutes of me being in pain. They took another like 15-20 minutes to come up. She kind of like got this alcohol swab, and she was like, okay, so this is cold. She touched the top of my like shoulder, I think it was, and she was like, you feel how cold this is? Tell me when you feel that same amount of cold. And she touched up from my toes, like up, and when it got to like the right side of my leg, just below my gluteus maximus, I could feel the cold. So she was like, okay, so what's wrong is we didn't have enough of the medicine in the line. I was like at a level 8 and I needed to be at a 10. And what happened was she thought that since I'm 5 feet tall, I'm short, so I didn't need as much medicine as normal, but I actually did. So when she turned that up, I was like in bliss. I couldn't feel any contractions, even though my contractions were going off the charts and everything. So everything was completely perfect at that point. Oh yeah, and during the epidural, Eli was in the room. Claymore was also passed out on like the sofa in the room, so they were like, it's fine, he can stay in here. And I was just kind of hoping that he didn't wake up. And then Liam was with my sisters out in the waiting room who were there at the time. My parents were not there yet, and everyone wasn't there. I was kind of giving everyone updates, which is why I know the times, because when I sent the text, it was right after things happened, which is kind of cool to like look back at. It's like, you know, this time I did this time I did that. But anyways, moving on. After the epidural was adjusted correctly, The actual doctor came in and broke my water, and I jumped from 1.5 centimeters to 4 centimeters immediately. Things were like progressing along. So at that point, my parents came. They were in the waiting room at the time when I was getting the epidural. They like came in after the epidural. So they were there when my water broke and stuff. At that point, I wasn't like texting as much because everyone who needed to be updated was there except my grandma. At 6:52, I was 6 to 7 centimeters dilated and 90% effaced. At some point after that, I don't know the exact time, I ended up being 8 centimeters dilated. So after I was checked that time, I was still not feeling any contractions or anything. I slept for a little bit. I was just relaxed, you know, talking to my family for a little bit. We were watching Kids Baking Championship on the TV. It was super cool. I love that show. But I just love most baking and cooking shows, especially competitions. They're just really cool to watch. So the nurse came back in at some point and she had me lay on my left side. She explained that the epidural works by gravity or something like that. So if I'm too much on one side or something, it's gonna teeter to that particular side. Before she left, I asked her, like, you know, am I going to feel when I need to push? Because I just didn't want to like not push when I'm supposed to push, you know? I forgot what it felt like and I can't feel anything at all. So I was like, I wonder if I'm gonna feel when I need to push. And she was like, it's gonna feel like you need to poo. Well, it didn't feel like that at all. 35 minutes after she leaves, I'm still on my left side and all of a sudden, my right side, I had this like crippling pain, sharp pain in my right side of my body. I don't know, it was terrible. I was like, my eyes were tearing up, my teeth were like super clenched. It like literally had me gripping the side of the hospital bed. Everyone kind of was looking at me super concerned because they noticed like I was really like in a lot of pain. Eli was like, okay, I need to call the nurse. And I was like, I think I've just been laying on my left side too long. Maybe the epidural kind of just went too much to the left side and there's none on the right side. So I started laying on my right side instead. I was like, it's supposed to work in 15 minutes. So I'm over on my right side for 15 minutes. The contractions are happening every 1 to 1.5 minutes apart again because she turned back up the Pitocin after the epidural because she wanted to move things along. I got so exhausted in that 15 minutes. The contractions were just so bad. I can't even explain to you how bad they were, but they were terrible. It was like it was taking all the energy out of me to be able to get through those contractions. So Eli was like, it's been 15 minutes, it's not working, I'm calling her now. So he calls the nurse, she comes in. I was like, can you please, like I had just gotten over a contraction, I barely had any like energy or breath or anything, and I was like begging her to turn the Pitocin level down. And she literally looked at me with tears in my eyes and said, I can't turn it down because we need to keep things going. And then I got hit with another contraction. She ended up checking me mid-contraction to check how dilated I was. And she was like, yeah, it's not that the epidural's not working. It's that it's time to push. You're 10 centimeters dilated. So at that point, the doctor came in. They broke the bed down for like pushing and whatever. My legs were like put to the side. I couldn't move my legs on my own. So everyone helped me with that. We could only have a certain amount of people in the room. So we had to like have people leave. Yeah, the boys were out of the room obviously because I didn't want them in the room for that. They were in the room like pretty much for everything else except for the epidural. So yeah, the bed was broken down. I was in the pushing position, but I was so tired from all the contractions I was having that I just didn't know if I had the energy or not. Eli's up here, my dad's over here, and I'm holding both of their hands and I am pushing and nothing is happening except I'm not feeling pain. As soon as I started pushing through those contractions, I wasn't feeling pain anymore. It was like that was what I needed to do to get rid of pain, you know, but I didn't know that that was what I needed to do. I'm so used to pushing 1 or 2 times and feeling like the baby's already coming out. So when I pushed the first time and didn't feel any type of progress, I was like, I can't do this, but I didn't say anything. I was just quiet. And then I looked up at this like reflective glass up there, I guess, and I just saw the kind of tears in my eyes and was like, you can do this because you really don't want a C-section. You're terrified of that more than anything else, so you have to do this. So I kind of like closed my eyes and was like affirming myself, and I was like, yeah, you've got this. And then I remembered that's not how I'm supposed to push. I am supposed to be holding the back of my legs, and I was reminded by the nurse. So I held the back of my legs and I pushed and I felt the progress. Like I felt the baby coming out. I looked up at the glass and I like saw little piece of his head. The next 2 contractions came and by the end of those, I had pushed him out. He's here. And he was here. And we have our little bundle. But yeah, that is the story of how this little guy got here. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching, and we will see you in our next video. Yeah, I didn't realize how much I missed the newborn stage until now. But we're still done having kids.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe as well, and tap that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. More videos come, so please stay tuned.